Okay, well, it looks like we are issue free. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I'd like to introduce our panel today. From the RightScale side, again, this is Josh Frazier. I'm the Vice President of Business Development. I'm joined by Ed Goldberg, one of the RightScale evangelists. On the Q&A logs, we have Matthew Small, who's one of our senior account managers, and then David Welch, who is a sales engineer. From Splunk, I'm pleased to be joined by Michael Wild, who is Director of Splunk's Powered Associate Program. And then also on the Q&A log is Simon Shelston, a Solutions Architect for Splunk. The Q&A log is well staffed, so please at any time during today's webinar, feel free to submit a question. We'll answer them real time as best we can and certainly follow up after the webinar like we always do with any questions that remain unanswered. So go ahead and submit and let's get going. So on the agenda, we're actually going to kick it off by taking you through, giving you a little sneak peek of kind of a common circumstance of how you'd use Splunk and RightScale. We're going to look at a break-in, a security breach, kind of whet your appetite. We'll certainly come back and provide more details, but thought we'd kick it right off with a real example and demonstrate the power of Splunk and RightScale. We'll then circle back and talk briefly about the RightScale Splunk partnership, why we did this, and why it's a great solution for folks looking to deploy in the cloud. Then I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Mr. Wild, who's going to tell you a bit more about Splunk, including a real tour. And then finally, we're going to circle back to Ed, and he's actually going to take you through step-by-step how you would go about adding Splunk to a deployment within the RightScale management system. And again, please feel free to fire those questions away, and we'll tackle them one by one. Okay, I'd like to turn things over to Ed, who's going to take us through a break-in example.
Oh, thanks very much, Josh. That was a great introduction. My name's Ed Goldberg, and what I'm going to be doing is giving you a real quick, this is going to go really fast, introduction into what Splunk is all about, but I wanted to show you first what the presentation looks like. We have a whole bunch of servers out there in the cloud, and they're both in the United States, in the US AWS server, and in the EU cloud. So this actually is one of the first times we're going to be presenting clouds all over the world, which is really pretty cool. So let me flip over to the other screen and start showing you RightScale. This is the first time that we've been showing EU, so there's some new menus to see and some nice things. So diving right in. RightScale has been really, really good up to this point in showing analytics and graphs and plots. Here's just a simple show of what it looks like within the RightScale dashboard to see what's going on within servers, but we never could show you deep down in the application happening between the servers and what's happening at the application level. So that's where Splunk comes into play. The partnership with Splunk shows you deep down in the application what's going on. So what I want to show you here is what's happening during a break-in. So here's an interesting plot. This is a frequency analysis of which IPs are being attacked at what points in time to our servers. We're doing this by searching the logs on all of the servers. If you look on the right-hand side over here, you can see all of the servers that are involved in this deployment, and we'll dig down into the deployment and we'll see there are actually quite a collection of servers in here. So I'm going to go back to the server list, and as you can see, we have quite a deployment. The number of servers that are actually being shown gives you an idea of how many servers are going on and how many servers are on the EU and how many in the United States. Okay? So getting back to Splunk over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a search to find something out. I've been told by my application people that a guy named Nasty Guy has logged into one of our servers. So I'm going to run a search against Nasty Guy and see what's going on over here. What we're going to find is during the last few hours, somebody has actually logged into one of our servers. This is a break-in attempt. And I'm interested in knowing more about this guy. So I'm going to search for a needle in a haystack, something that would have been very, very difficult to do. I know his IP address now. I know who Nasty Guy is. Let's find out more about him by actually searching all the logs on every single computer over all time to see what nasty guy's been up to. So here we are. The results of this search are going to show you every time a person with that IP address logged into every one of our servers over all time. And I can zero in because it looks like over the last 24 hours he's been very busy. Well, this isn't surprising because nasty guy is, of course, me, and I'm breaking into the server. But this is just a quick peek to show you how you can examine your logs and you can dive in to what's going on within your deployment and actually see information at the application level. So I'm going to send it back up to Josh for more of a high-level slide view, and then we're going to come back in and talk to Michael Wild, and I'll get into the how do you put this in your deployment and how do you add the Splunk templates into your deployment. And so back to Josh for now. You ready, Josh?
Yeah, thanks, Ed.
Put back over your slides. There we go. And I'll hand the keyboard over to you.
Great. So let's keep nasty guy out, shall we?
That's a good idea. But we could detect him now and I could set an alert, right?
Good thinking. All right, so let's spend a few minutes just introducing RightScale. I think hopefully most of the folks on the phone are generally familiar with what RightScale is all about, but we are a cloud management platform, and we're specifically designed towards helping fill a gap between the low-level cloud infrastructure resources and the applications and workloads that customers are looking to run. There's three core areas of value that we focus on. The first is a high degree of automation around common management and lifecycle tasks. These include things around configuration management, to running a software patch, changing a configuration file, to things such as auto-scaling, which tend to get a lot of press and some great sex appeal there. So automation is one key category of RightScale solutions. The second is around a library of components, specifically what we call server templates and write scripts. And what these are is prepackaged solutions designed around the common workloads that customers want to run in the cloud. So things like how to set up an auto-scaling application server array, how to set up a redundant database master-slave configuration with failover procedures. And then most recently, with the Splunk partnership, there's pre-configuration, specifically Splunk server templates and Splunk write scripts, to easily integrate Splunk into your RightScale deployment. You're going to see how that works when Ed takes us through the setup, but Splunk is in our component libraries and ready to be used today. And then last but not least, we complement all of this with expertise and support, specifically consultants that are designed to get you up and running on the cloud quickly and using best practices. Important also to note, RightScale is multi-cloud. In addition to support for our long-standing partner, Amazon, we also support FlexiScale, SliceHost from Rackspace, GoGrid, and then an open source initiative called Eucalyptus. Also key to RightScale in our approach is focusing on the entire lifecycle management of deploying in the cloud. So this is not only how to design cloud-ready servers specifically around your application and your deployment, but how to automate as much as possible the common management tasks that we're faced. With that, we stay intensely focused on what our customers need. So what are they trying to do and how are they going about doing it? And then designing RightScale to specifically address the requests that they're looking for. Customers want a fast on-ramp. They don't want to relearn new things when they deploy to the cloud. They want to automate as much as possible. Part of the benefits of the cloud are gaining incredible efficiencies in the consumption of IT resources. We want to make sure that customers aren't losing those efficiencies by having to throw more human power at deploying in the cloud. And then finally, our customers are really looking to manage real production deployments. These are multi-server deployments. These are complex deployments. And RightScale stays focused on how can we make the packaging and the deployment and the ongoing management of these clusters of servers in the cloud very easy and very pre-configured.
Yeah, because I don't want to lose any of that ability to look at my servers. Just because I went off into the cloud doesn't mean I don't want to see what's going on, right?
You're absolutely right, Ed. And when you show folks the Splunk templates and configuring, everyone's going to notice that what RightScale, one of our key tenets is automation, but not at the expense of control and transparency. So you control your deployment. You design your servers. When deploying on RightScale, you are in complete control of everything that's going on within the cloud. So let's talk a little bit about complexity and how we've addressed that through our ISV program. So obviously RightScale is a very comprehensive platform, but there are still many gaps that we simply cannot or do not want to fill on our own. So the ISV program was introduced to help fill those gaps, to identify what applications were customers looking to run in the cloud and what additional features and functionality were critical to getting them up and running. We stayed focused on approaches that are not static. I mean, to deploy in the cloud, you need to be agile. You need to be agile both in your architecture as well as your business model. And then finally, our goal here was to reduce the barriers for deploying in the cloud with a third-party application. So if someone wants to deploy one of our ISV partner apps in the cloud and we're making it very difficult, we've defeated the purpose. So the net result of this ISV program is a series of pre-integrated server templates and write scripts in a very similar fashion to how we're delivering our own RightScale developed templates and write scripts. Our partner templates and write scripts are ready to go, easily added to deployments and within the RightScale management system architecture, and perhaps most importantly, incorporate best practices. So specifically with our endeavor that led to the partnership with Splunk, customers were looking for better tools around logging, compliance, security, and business analytics. We entered the marketplace and started talking to a variety of partners, and what we really found is that customers were asking for Splunk. In working with the Splunk folks, we found that their real-time IT search is perfectly suited for the dynamic nature of what the cloud's all about. And then most recently with their Splunk-powered associate program, they've adopted a very complementary cloud-friendly pricing model which enables all RightScale customers to try Splunk out at no cost, easily add them to their deployment, and then as they progress, take them through a very easy upsell path to get more functionality out of Splunk. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Wild, who's going to give us a bit of a deeper dive into Splunk, including a tour of the service. Just a quick reminder, feel free to continue to add any questions that you have on the Q&A log located at the bottom of your console. So Mike, take it away.
Cool, thanks. Can we get back to the presentation?
You want to go back to the presentation
Yeah,
for a second? Okay.
Yeah.
More slideware, guys.
Yeah, and one of the things, that we're pretty excited about with RightScale, other than it being a pretty awesome service, is, Splunk, for those of you who know what it is, I'll talk about it a little bit, but the product typically, we have tons and tons, like 900, almost 1,000 enterprise customers, and most people download Splunk. And while you can actually get Splunk going faster than I can finish talking about one single slide, RightScale makes it even easier than that, which, is awesome. Heck, if it takes 5 minutes to download and install it, with RightScale it's pretty much even a few clicks, and they take care of deploying it. So we're going to see a little bit about that at the end of this webinar on how it's done. But to kind of level set, for those who don't know what Splunk is, I'll go through that so you get a good idea. So we call Splunk the IT search engine, or search engine for all of your IT data, whereas RightScale has a really nice monitoring console so you can see the statistics of what's happening. Splunk brings to the equation all the rest of the unstructured data, whether it's all your log data, your configuration files, or just tons of garbage that's being generated that you need to know about. So what are people going to use it for? Most of our customers use it for all these bubbles that are at the top of the screen, whether you've got compliance issues and someone needs to report on behavior. We saw a little bit about using Splunk for security. Typically, most customers want to keep their applications up and running, and they need to dig into the data that tells when a transaction has failed or whatever. So operations is an obvious example. And even in the same Splunk server, the same deployment, the same pile of information, where I can look at a security attack and I can see if a web server is operating right, I can get reports and business analytics based on information that's in my data, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that. Now, additionally, we kind of look at Splunk, and some customer examples are pretty good. An enterprise customers that'll do things like using it for security. Guys over at Motorola have a wide variety of infrastructure, and they've got a lot going on. And so a really common use case is, how do I know if a contractor that was working, let's say, for Motorola, and his or her contract expired, how do we know whether they've been cleaned off all the systems, their laptop doesn't actually have access to anything? So with a massive amount of data generated by firewalls and routers and switches and applications, it was a big, big task for Dave, for example, prior to Splunk. With him installing Splunk, it becomes a simple search, and he gets the answers that he's actually looking for in a really quick manner. So getting into the product, there's three main things that most people do with Splunk. They search on data, they create alerts, and they also visualize that data in reporting. So again, if you've never seen Splunk, you get to use the same sort of search style you're used to with Google. Different technology, but if you find an error, you can just start typing it in. If you're looking at a host, you can do that as well. Uniquely, however, Splunk organizes information by the time that it happened, which is pretty cool because you can, if you don't know what you're looking for, you can say, well, I think there was a problem between 140 and 145, and then drill in. You can also see information across a wide variety of hosts. You can take a number of breadcrumbs and assemble them together into a transaction so you can see where somebody went or all the actions that someone took. Additionally, one of the challenges with things in the cloud is, you've got all this infrastructure out there, and matter of fact, you may be going across multiple clouds. If you think about it, Amazon's EU, Europe, and US are pretty much two different clouds. There are a few things that are shared between them. And I can have information flowing across clouds. I can aggregate it all in one place. And, I can even have a good idea. Maybe I was using autoscaling, and we scaled up to a couple hundred servers yesterday, and then we scaled back down. How do we see what was happening on those, on those nodes after they're offline? A lot of things you can do just with search once we have the data. Now, when I'm searching on information, I might be finding an error that's happening, or I might be doing a security investigation. I also might want to take that data and turn it into a real-time alert that notifies my sysadmin, notifies my team if it's a report, and I can do that via RSS in my browser if I'm sitting in front of it. Obviously I can send an email, take other automated actions as well if you needed to modify your IP tables, or you needed to send a higher alert to a higher level system, or even do something that's just send a report out every Saturday at midnight. And finally, on the subject of reports, information typically in log data and configuration files looks very text-based, as we've seen, and it's often a Herculean effort to get any sort of reporting out of that in the past with most of the tools. So Splunk makes it easy for you to just transition between a view of the data and a view of it in a summarized reporting manner. I'll actually demonstrate that shortly. But I can take those reports, I can download new ones, I can share them with other users. As I find a problem, I can go ahead and take and save it. Save that search, save that visualization, put it on somebody's dashboard, email it out. Again, Splunk's a very deep product, but we try to make finding information, visualizing it, and alerting people, pretty simple. How do we get started on this? Like I said, it's actually simpler than downloading Splunk, which itself is really simple. It's even easier on RightScale. Basically just add a write script to your deployment, turn it on, software's deployed and configured, and you begin eating your data. It's a term we use at Splunk. You just take your data, you eat it. You don't spend a lot of time configuring Splunk to understand your data. You just turn it on, and you just start searching on it. And finally, kind of bringing this back to solving real problems for people, and when you are interested in going to the next level, how you justify all this. Like the two big cases that most people like Splunk for are operations, because the bigger your infrastructure gets, while it's great that it's in the cloud, The complexity is still there. There's still a large amount of infrastructure to manage. RightScale makes it super easy to do that. Splunk makes it super easy to manage that data. Okay, so usually you're going to end up with a faster mean time to repair. For the finance guys, that'll definitely help out. And then also, you know, like Dave Hayskamp from Motorola, the ability to investigate security incidents it's simple, right? It's fast. I kind of say to people, there are three things that folks do in IT. They deploy stuff that works, they fix things that are broke, and spend the rest of the time finding why what works is now broke. And we try to make that very, very fast. So I'll give you guys a little bit of a tour of Splunk so you know how it works, and I'll show you some tricks. And then we will, Ed will show you kind of how things get going. Browser. Thanks. Great. So after Splunk is deployed in your deployment, what you'll see likely is you'll see a getting started screen. There's a URL you go to access Splunk, and you'll see a getting started screen. It'll give you some information on how to get more data in, but we can also switch to the main page. Now, there's no reason why you can't just type in the search box and just start looking for whatever it is you're interested in. But I'll give you a few pointers. So we didn't really have to do anything to get Splunk to understand how to index this data. Search engines index data so that you can search against them, and they present the data so you can retrieve it. So Splunk will show you a small dashboard here that shows you all the index data. And this might be all of the HTTP access logs across all the servers. And then we categorize that into something we call source types, all the access combined data, all the RPM package installations, all config files, and even all Apache errors. So everything is clickable. It's a very fun AJAX-style interface to use. And of course, some people start to look at things by host. As you can see, we've got these crazy cryptic host names that Amazon gives, which may or may not mean something to you. But it looks like Ed has actually tagged some of those hosts based on their importance. One's LAN.
You know, what's really neat here is it was really easy to do that. I just went in and changed the name of one of the tags to one of the guys where Nasty Guy broke in. And, hey, Michael, do you have to add all these things by hand, or is this all done automatically? That's a lot of typing.
It pretty much does it all automatically. You just tell it to eat data, and it arrives.
Wow.
Let's do a little bit of searching. I'll give you guys some tips. So, you know, if I was going to go ahead and type something like the word error, as you can see, that type ahead drop-down box shows me everything that has been indexed that's ahead of what I'm typing. So it makes it easy for me to, you know, type in an IP address, look at a whole network segment, or just make sure I don't misspell the word error. Now, when I do that search, Splunk is going to return the most recent set of events based on the time range I selected. Different than other search engines, you get this time factor. So like I said, it's a pretty interactive AJAX-based user interface, so maybe I was looking for anything, I wanted to add invalid into my search. So I can just click on that. Of course, I can copy and paste, but again, I like to do things in a quick manner. Also, maybe I'd like to filter out things, you know, that are not from this specific host. So I can hit the Alt key and click on that. I can also add a not in there. So pretty simple. Another one of the things I really like about Splunk is I have the ability to zoom in and zoom out over time, and I can change my time range based on the things that I'm interested in. So we might click on the time graph. I might zoom in. I also may decide to, you know, use the time graph to determine, you know, interesting things to look at. So we'll dig a little bit deeper. Now I'm going to go ahead and we'll go ahead and filter this. Pop back to the home page. I'm just going to run a search on, let's say, invalid user. So we should probably have some invalid user events that are in there, which are typical SSH type events. Well, Splunk's automatically going to extract information out of these events and turn them into fields. And, it's really powerful. It'll do it for you automatically. You can add your own fields in there, all without having to pre-program a schema and all without really having to do too much work. So as we can see, in the drop-down box, these fields, and again, these fields are here just because I typed in invalid user, versus if I typed in HTTP GET, for example, I'd get a different set of fields. It's very unique how you can put all this information in one data store and let different people look at it based on what they're interested in. So this source IP, this is interesting. Like, where are all these source IPs that are attacking my server, or what are the most popular usernames? And while you saw in the beginning of this demo a little bit of a dashboard that showed that, how did I create that? So I basically went here, clicked on source IP, clicked report on this field, and the search language changes a little bit. Goes beyond just the typical Boolean search language and lets you operate on the results. Now Splunk is basically going to show me a top 10, and we can actually add in a chart. Maybe we'll put in a line graph, for example. We also may decide to change that as well. So if I mouse over here, I start to see, a frequency of each field that's in here and a little bit of information. Again, I'm not having to learn a query language. Don't have to do another where clause. I can basically just click my way to freedom. Finally,
and when you're all done, you can just save all this as a query, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely, we'll do
so
that.
So the next guy can just benefit by your wonderful query.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like as well, being able to share this information. So I'm going to go ahead and do a count of source IP, and maybe we'll split it by username. And we'll go ahead and give it a stacked area graph, so we can sort of get a good idea of, per source IP, what are the types of people that are coming in and trying to get into my system. And now, like Ed said, I'm going to go ahead and save that search. Any search can be saved, so it could be, Simon could be in looking for, some security events in the Windows event log. Ed might be trying to figure out why someone's messing with his blog, or even Josh might be running a search or running a report to see how many of these emails bounced for the webinar invite. It really doesn't matter. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll just call this security events I care about. If I want to, I could add it to a dashboard. I'll go ahead and put it on the admin dashboard. And then some searches, like the ones that might be looking for something sophisticated like failed successful logins within 3 or 4 failed root logins. You might run that on a schedule and notify a higher level admin. Or in this case, this is a report. So maybe we'll just, every Saturday at midnight, run this search. Anytime the report comes back with any data, we'll create an RSS feed, and we'll go ahead and send it to Ed, because he doesn't get enough email as it is.
Oh, thank you. That's exactly what I needed.
More
emails.
So Splunk, we try to make Splunk pretty simple. It's extremely powerful for you to be able to just start searching, look for anything that you're, any sort of information, whether it's compliance case or it's security or, it's even reporting based on the health of a RightScale, for example. But all simple, all usable, and like I said, really, really easy to deploy within the cloud.
Yeah, flip over to table mode on that one. That one's really interesting in table mode.
Yeah, you can go ahead and take control, Ed. It's back to you.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, one of the things I like about these plots, I'm going to flip that last plot into table mode. So that stacked bar graph that we saw before, we're now seeing the same thing as a pile of numbers. So now I can actually see that I actually do 404 of these events for each server every hour. It's every 20 minutes, I think it is, on this plot. Let's go back to the plot. So, boy, thank you, Michael. This really showed us a lot about the ninja way to use this system. I wish I was as good at the keyboard as you are. But it really shows me all the wonderful things you can do. And a lot of the stuff that you see set up here on the screen, Michael did for me and put it on my pages. So I didn't have to be that good at setting up all these nice plots. And he was really good about setting up quite a few for us. So we have a lot of really nice plots to look at here, and I'll go through a couple so you can see what's going on here before I dive into my little piece here. This is the frequency of names used to log into the servers. Oh, by the way, no attempt to log into one of these servers by name will ever work because we use a key-based access. So we're not disclosing anything in particular with this demo. These are all fruitless ways to attack a server. And this interesting plot on the last plot is the frequency of trying to log in that way by IP address. So each different IP address is colored. So we know who's trying to log in, by what name, and on what server where. So it'd be interesting if somebody actually knew the names of all my servers that were disjoint. They may be on the inside, for example. So enough at the top of Splunk. Now it's time to deploy this thing and actually see how to add Splunk to a website, for example, like this one. Remember from our previous webinars, we have a website that we use as a demonstration website, and this website has all of the goodness of a basic WordPress blog deployed through RightScale as a presentation. And what I've done is I've built a deployment that deploys this information from a RightScale Splunkified website. So now let's kick over to the actual deployment itself of that website. Just like we've seen in previous webinars, it's constructed of a collection of app servers, load balancers, web servers, master and slave databases, and now we're adding Splunk forwarders and Splunk indexers to the mix. We got a lot of servers running right now. So the big question is, how do you take your deployment and add Splunk to your deployment? And I'm going to show you how easy it is to do that. Well, the first thing you'd expect me to do is to go over to this bar over here and say add a server. Well, that's not the way it works. We had to add Splunk to your templates or your servers. To do that, I'm going to start with a partner template because this thing's all about partners. And we're going to go to server templates and we're going to add to a standard Bitnami TrackWiki template, which is one of our partner programs, and we're going to add Splunk to that. The first step has to be to go to that individual template. I'm going into the template for a TrackWiki. So I've searched for it and I found it. And now I'm inside that individual. I can't edit it because that particular template is not owned by me. And I need to add the Splunk goodness basically to that one. So we're going to use this clone button over here and clone it. What happens for people that are not very familiar with RightScale, when you clone a template, is it becomes one of your private templates. And I always change the name when I do that, so I remember what I did. So it's a cloned template, if I can spell cloned. Good enough. Plus Splunk. Okay, everybody's laughing there. I better spell Splunk better.
Broken keyboard.
Broken keyboard. I know what it is. He's typing while I'm typing.
Pepcac.
I should. No. I shouldn't have given him the idea. Okay, very good. So now this template is my template. And if I go back to server templates, I can see that in my private templates that are owned by me, I have a copy of a published template that I didn't write. It was actually written by somebody else. And here it is, on today's date, a cloned template. I did that so I have the right to go in there and edit the scripts, which is the next thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go into the scripts for this cloned copy of a template. That could be a RightScale template, a partner template, or one of your templates. And I go down here to the premium and partner write scripts, and I select the Splunk addition to a deployment. So let's find Splunk here, and I want to do the right one. I want to add a forwarder. What a forwarder is a little piece of software that goes inside your server and forwards all the information to the indexer. Okay? So we're going to do a forwarder install. Okay? And we're going to install that at boot time. So I use the boot script and I do an add. Okay, now that I've added it, and I added it as my last step because I want to collect all those logs even after the boot. What's going to happen is when this template boots or launches, it's going to start the Splunk forwarder and it's going to forward to the indexer that's already running in my deployment. So now I have a EC2 US server template cloned called a Splunk Bignami. Now I'll go back and do what you probably expected me to do in the first place, which go to my deployment and add this now modified server. And there aren't a lot of steps past this. I add it to my server. So I'm over in my deployment. I'm popping up the Add Server menu. Now I have to go in, not to the RightScale templates, watch out, to the partners, no, the private, yes, the private. So now I can select from my private templates all the ones that I've added Splunk to. In this particular case, we added the Splunk track. So that's the one, and I spelled it right there, Michael. Okay? And we must give it a nickname so we can run it. In this case, it's going to be my track, and we're going to add plus Splunk. Okay? So when it comes up on the screen and all the warnings and things happen, the right things are going to happen. Give it the right key. This is very important. Unless the forwarder has the same keys as your indexer, they can't talk over HTTPS and SSL to each other. So it's really important that all your servers have the same key, be in the same security group. Same availability zone? No. They can be in different zones. They can even be in different parts of the country. Now I can do my add operation. So now I've added a new server to the deployment that is a little special. It's my old server, but I've added one more script, Splunk. And that's pretty much it. My next job is simply to launch the server. So as you well know, there are a lot of questions to be answered. I haven't gone through all of the individual parameters required, but those are very well detailed in our RightScale wiki, and we'll tell you all the answers to the questions for the different parameters for this. So I'm going to do the launch operation, and there are only a few things that are not set up here, and those have to do with the Bignami template itself. So my login, don't let anybody let me forget, is demo. My email address is ed@RightScale. My name is Ed, and my password is going to be demo. Everybody remind me my password so it'll work later. And when I'm all done filling out my form, I simply hit launch, and I've added one more server to my deployment that has added to it the Splunk forwarder. So as you can see, as Michael said a moment ago, it's really that easy to add Splunk forward server. Let me tell you a few caveats. It does use a couple of ports. They're 9997, right, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got to be careful not to interfere with that port. Is there anything else we should watch out for when we integrate a Splunk forwarder, something that might interfere with some user's application?
No, pretty much runs on its own. All the dependencies are there, and it's easy. So, just to make sure that people are clear, this concept of a forwarder, it's still the same Splunk software that runs on the indexer. It's just configured in a different way, so it runs on a lightweight mode and just streams data up in real time.
Okay, so data is being streamed. You call it uphill. In the cloud, it's sort of hard to think about up.
Right.
It's streaming between servers, between clouds over SSL links using certs, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay, very good. So for people that are sort of familiar with RightScale, that little up arrow, of course, means it's booting, and that means we have time for a few questions. So I'm going to send it back over to Josh here for a moment, and let's spend this good time while the server is launching and ask a few questions and answer a few questions. So Josh, do you have any questions for us?
Sure. There's been a couple questions on pricing, so why don't we just talk a little bit about that. So just to clarify, initially within RightScale, what you just saw Ed do, that is completely free. So if you are a developer account user within RightScale, or if you're a paid user within RightScale, the Splunk templates for the forwarder and the indexer are available in the partner libraries. You can use them today as soon as this webinar ends. On Splunk Enterprise pricing, Michael, why don't you walk the group through, if you don't mind, the different pricing structures when customers are looking to upgrade?
Yeah, good question. So what's deployed inside of RightScale is the free license of Splunk. We do have a free license, so hey, you have a data center at home and you want to put it on your Windows laptop, you can go ahead and do that. We don't mind. But for some of the more enterprise features, like we have distributed search and roles-based access control, the enterprise license is required for that, and Splunk is priced based on the daily volume of information that is indexed. So, you know, the free license lets you index up to 500 megabytes of data a day, which is, it's kind of nice because you might be getting started in the cloud and you can, you know, deploy Splunk and use it for free. If you exceed that license, you're given the opportunity to inquire, get a trial license for enterprise. The Splunk sales team will contact you, and you know, they'd be happy to give you a quote. But you know, you may decide you need a 1 gigabyte a day license, a 10 gigabyte a day. We have, you know, customers using all ranges. We generally chose a pricing model like that because it's based on the amount of data that you have to look through, and you know, it's pretty simple. We're more than happy to answer questions or, you know, send out quotes.
Great, I appreciate that. You know, there was another question on overhead. Specifically, what overheads does Splunk add? Especially interested to know interface traffic, CPU overheads it will add to our servers.
Yeah, good question. So the configuration, you know, you'll have a Splunk indexer, and that'll be an instance that's running, and that's holding all your data, just like our demo or a splunk.rightscalewebinar.com server. That's basically there and holding everything. When you have Splunk put on your instance as a forwarder, it runs in an extremely lightweight mode, less than 1% of CPU, probably about 25 to 50 megabytes of RAM, sort of acts like an agent. Same software, but acts like an agent. And it's going to send, in real time, data from your, you know, instance that's out there up to your indexer. And it'll do that as fast as it can. Now, if you decide, hey, you know, I really don't want, I want it to slow down the rate at which it sends data, you absolutely can do that. We have people that install it on their desktop Windows server, and they don't need it in real time. So got a lot of configuration ability, but really it doesn't hit the performance of your machine in the way that you might be concerned about.
Great. You know, another question, and maybe Ed, you can show the other half of this equation, was around where is the data sent? You know, is any data sent outside of my network? You know, the Splunk forwarder goes to where?
Okay, that's a really important question, and this has to do with the security zones within AWS and how you set up your individual forwarders versus indexers. When you set up a forwarder inside EC2 and use an internal network address to address your Splunk server, your Splunk indexer, nothing leaves EC2, and that bandwidth within EC2 between servers is free. You do not pay a price for it. Now, in the case of our server over in the EU in our deployment, it's actually going between two different clouds. That information is going out over, once again, SSL or HTTPS between clouds, and you would pay for that bandwidth. And I thought it was interesting, that question from before about how much bandwidth is being used, so I flipped over to our application server, which is talking to our forwarder, and you can actually answer that question for yourself. This is the number of kilobytes of data that's actually being transmitted and received from that app server right now. So the answer to your question is you can monitor that level of information with RightScale and know precisely how much information is going back and forth between the forwarders and the indexer, and precisely what your overheads are. So, you know, one of the nice things about this marriage between RightScale and Splunk is that you can now actually see those numbers and turn on and off the forwarder and look at the difference in the amount of I/O going out of your web server or your app server, whatever's running on those machines, and how much is being fed to the indexer. The second part of the question has to do with the information that's actually stored within the indexer. We use in EC2 a wonderful technology called EBS, which is like a storage area network or a SAN. So all the information that's being stored inside the indexer is actually stored in the storage area network off the server. It's not even actually on the Splunk indexing server. It's in the storage area network, and it's being backed up through the EBS snapshot system. So I'm going to go right here into our large server that we're using as the indexer. By the way, I highly recommend, if you want any performance at all, that you have a large server. And we'll look here at the volumes that are being used within the RightScale dashboard. So all your index information is being kept in a Splunk volume. In this case, I set aside 20 gigabytes of space and mounted it on /dev/sdj on the Splunk indexer. And what's really neat is we take care of the backups for you. So Michael, when you install it from the website that you have, how do you deal with backups?
Yeah, you got to deal with it on your own.
So RightScale comes to the rescue here. We did the backup script for you.
Thank you very much.
So if I go in our scripts here and I look at our boot scripts, what you're going to see is I've set up a backup schedule. This is the Splunk continuous backup schedule. The screen will flip here in a moment. There you go. That's the Splunk continuous backup schedule. So we're not only taking care of installing your Splunk for you, we take care of your backup regime. By the way, that string over here, I know it's a little hard to read. 2 star 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 is in cron format. So it's actually 45 2 star star star. So that means 45 minutes after 2 a.m. in the morning every day, this volume will be backed up. If you want to edit that to back it up every hour, that would be just fine. That would be 0 star 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 star, just in cron format. So you can back up your EBS volume and keep all this precious data wherever you need it. So back to you, Josh. What's the next question?
Hey, Ed, am I to understand that that continuous backup is also a write script that is added in the same process in which you did the forwarder?
Well, the forwarder doesn't back anything up. Remember, the forwarder is lightweight. There is no information kept on your server, which is really cool because if somebody breaks into the server, they won't get access to the indexed information from other servers. Pretty nice.
But the continuous backup is also a write script that's available for customers in the library. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Every one of the scripts that you're seeing here is available. Every one of these scripts is fully readable by you, and all the code you can read. Great transparency. And if you don't like the way this works, you want to update the frequency or change the way backups are done, you can go right ahead and do it. But once again, let me remind you, you only back up the indexer. That's where the precious data is. The forwarder forwards the information and forgets it immediately.
Great.
And then for the benefit of everybody, you know, folks wonder, well, what happens to all this data, and what if I don't need it? I don't need, you know, more than 90 days or a year. So you can configure your Splunk to begin to retire data. So I may decide, you know, I really don't need anything longer than 90 days. You can basically have Splunk sort of push that off and you know, move it out of your index. Pretty simple.
Great. So we got time for a few more questions here. So next one is, I'm already aggregating logs on a log server. Do I still need to run forwarders on each server?
Good question. So if you're getting, there's a couple of reasons why I like to run a forwarder. One, if you got most of your logs, you know, already up on that server, great. Just have Splunk eat those, right? Splunk can also monitor the status of your file system. So if you've got configuration files out there for your application, you can have Splunk not only index them, but also index the event of change if you happen to have an unauthorized change that happens. And then while a lot of folks will forward information with syslog, sometimes there are other application logs that aren't as easy to forward, like maybe, you know, Tomcat or WebSphere or, you know, other custom applications. Having a forwarder on there is really cool. And then finally, the forwarder does buffer. So if, you know, you lose a network connectivity for some reason, which probably will never happen in the cloud, but hey, you could be across multiple clouds, it's going to resume after you you know, get connectivity available. So don't have to, but it's just an option for you.
Great.
Let me break in just for a second because our machine just cooked and came up and running. We've been running for 8.8 minutes here. Remember a while back we launched our Track Plus Splunk server, and I have it up here on the screen. What I'd like to do is dive into that server and note that it came operational just fine. And if I go to the IP address of that server, it doesn't have a DNS entry yet because it was just launched a moment ago, and click here on the public DNS name for that server, I can actually go to that server that was launched, and you can see it's real. It really got launched, and it's a Bitnami template with Splunk added. Now I can go and access the actual track wiki. This is a nice one because it allows you to have multiple projects on your single server, which is nice. So I'll go into the project whose name is project, and you can see, lo and behold, I have a brand new wiki complete with all the wonderful facilities of ticketing system and all the other nice features This is a template care of Bitnami, but the point here is an important one. I've now blended two different partner programs together. I have a template from Bitnami for Track, which is a lovely open source project, blended with Splunk's forwarder on the same server. And this is the agile part we were talking about before. We've taken multiple pieces and done what some people would call a mashup of different templates. And we can continue adding more components to your servers or to different servers whenever we need to. So here's the proof of the pudding. We've actually launched a server and added to that server in the scripts, and I can show you the scripts here in the actual boot script screen. So you can see I did in fact launch the right server. And there it is. My Splunk forward has been added and didn't interfere with the other template. So back to more questions. Just wanted to show everybody what it looked like that it actually worked. Josh?
Great, thanks Ed. Pretty amazing stuff. Can Splunk index our SVN changes?
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. We have there's a customer down in San Diego that makes cell phones. They make chips. They're a huge employer in San Diego, and that's one of the neat things they did. They're actually indexing all of the data from Perforce, and they have alerts running to see if there are too many syncs that are happening, or some users actually syncing the entire tree more than they normally should, which means that source code is probably about to leave that customer. And again, Splunk doesn't really care what kind of data. It has to be in text, right? As long as it's some reasonable text format, it'll just eat it. You can start searching on it. Pretty simple.
Great, thank you. And then maybe one more question here. Are there any known conflicts between Splunk and other software on port 9997?
Yeah, I think we answered that on the question list. But we, at Splunk, we really haven't seen anybody have any conflicts. But that port 9997 is a port that's open on the indexer. Okay. So there really isn't going to be anything else running on that indexer because it's a server that's there for Splunk. And that forwarder is just going to send information up securely over SSL, and it's going to hit the forwarder. So totally configurable. You can change the ports to whatever you want, but they pretty much work out of the box as they're set up.
Great. Okay. Well, Michael, thank you. Ed, thank you. Appreciate it. Ed, if you jump back to the slides here, why don't we wrap things up? So just a couple key reminders, folks. One, the Splunk server templates and write scripts that you saw Ed using, those are available for all of our users, our free developer account users, as well as our paid customers. We're more than happy to help you get up and running. If you'd like a private, one-on-one demonstration of how to use Splunk in your deployment, don't hesitate to call us. We're happy to schedule a time and walk you through that. Or also, if you're just getting started on the cloud and just have some general questions or specific questions about, what our best practice is, what should I be concerned with, feel free to contact us at sales@rightscale.com. We'll schedule a live personal webinar and give you a tour of the service and answer any questions that you may have. So again, Splunk is ready to try out. You can find out more information on how to configure it on your own on our wiki. That's wiki.rightscale.com. There's some great tutorials on there about RightScale in general and Splunk specifically. And of course, don't hesitate to sign up for our free developer account, which is available at rightscale.com/free trial. That is a limited version of RightScale. However, you can use it for as long as you want. You do need to enter your own cloud credentials, but go ahead and get started today. Try Splunk out, and then give us a shout, and we're happy to talk to you further. We are going to keep the Q&A log open for a few more minutes, and any questions that we weren't able to address live, we will be following up, as we always do, with specific answers to those questions after the webinar. And then last but not least, this webinar, along with all of the others, is recorded, both the audio and video, and that'll be available on rightscale.com. Usually it takes us a few hours to get that up, so go ahead and check back later on today or first thing tomorrow. Thanks, everyone, for joining, and that concludes our webinar.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for attending.